Now, should we go ahead and get started, you guys?
Absolutely.
All right, so I want to thank everyone for joining us and apologize again for any difficulties on our side. Again, technology just doesn't like me sometimes, and it breaks my heart because I love technology. It just does not love me. So thank you for joining us for today's forum. This is the October Transportation Lean Forum. And we have everyone muted upon coming in, but we do ask that you also mute your phone just in case. If you do want to say anything, you just remember to unmute your phone so that people can hear what you're saying, or you can use the chat to pass along any questions or comments. We do have someone monitoring it. It is one of our fellow interns. Her name is Sydney. You can contact her through the chat or through her email address right there. So these are where all of our TLF members are. So we have people, excuse my voice, I'm sorry. We have people from all over the world joining us today. Some of our speakers are from Canada today, and we have some from, or one from California. So thank you to them for joining us and taking the time to be a part of this. So we are going to start. I've kind of already gone through our introductions and everything. We are going to start with our team from Ontario. Brianne is going to be doing the, hi Brianne. Brianne is going to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Presenting. Thank you, Gary. She is going to be presenting for their team. So I'm going to go ahead and hand control over to her so that she can start presenting.
Hi there. Okay. I'm just going to take over controls. Okay. So hi, everyone. Just want to do a mic check. Can you hear me all right? Yeah.
We sure can.
Okay. So I am joined, my name is Brianne Curry. I'm joined by Trisha Zumianen, as well as Hadia Balki is on our team as well, and she's on the line. Trisha and I are located in St. Catharines, which is 20 minutes from Niagara Falls. So we have a nice picture of Niagara Falls on our slide, our introduction slide, and Hadia is located in Toronto. A little bit briefly about myself. I work in the Ontario Ministry of Transportation Strategy, Improvement and Innovation branch. Trisha, Hadia and I work on lean projects as well as increasing lean culture and understanding across our ministry. And across the Ontario Public Service, we're currently working on building up lean understanding across all our ministries. So today I'm going to talk to you about a specific project that our team worked on earlier this year, and actually it started October last year. What you see on the screen right now is a project A3. So a little note about A3s, our team uses A3s as a tool to provide a one-page summary of all the different components in a project. So this is our take on an A3. It doesn't look very conventional, but it basically has all the different phases of our project broken down into all the different sections. And so we use A3s for all our briefings with leadership as well as staff to provide updates on projects, that sort of thing. So I'm going to be taking you through all the sections of this A3 to explain this project. So the first section Oh, I see some of the pictures shifted, so please forgive that. But our first section is focused on scoping and defining the problem. So on the right side of the screen, you can see that we have our final problem statement. And I just want to make a note that this is not how our problem statement started off. Our problem statement was very basic to start off, and we use a tool called a problem brief, which there's a picture of it on the left side of the screen. You can't read it, but this is our problem brief is a tool that we use with clients to start to define the problem and diagnose the problem and understand what their perspective of the problem is. And then as we gather more information from staff, we refine our problem. And the problem statement that you see on the page is what we landed on once we gathered a lot more metrics and further understanding from both users or clients and the staff. So we started with our problem brief to initially define the problem, and from there we decided to do a number of different interviews with clients. And this process, I'll just give a brief overview of the process to provide some context. So this project was completed with the Fleet Management Center in the Ministry of Transportation. And what they are responsible for is managing all of the Ontario Public Services fleet vehicles. And those are vehicles that are used to provide different services for the public, such as doing inspections of farms or different warehouse workplaces, going to youth consultation services, a number of different reasons why there might be fleet vehicles required. The Fleet Management Center centrally manages those vehicles, all the expenses related to those vehicles, procuring those vehicles, as well as once a vehicle has reached the end of its life, disposing of it or selling it. So this project focused on their process to dispose of fleet vehicles. And when they approached us initially, they said that this process takes approximately 3 months to complete. And they saw that as a problem, and they wanted to have an understanding of why does it take 3 months, because they didn't know why it took 3 months. So that was kind of the basis of our problem to start. And so we started to get an understanding of the process from the interviews with clients, as well as 3 interviews with staff. And from those interviews that we did with users and clients, we developed what is called an empathy map. And this is a service design tool, so it's not necessarily a lean tool, but what it showcases is a little bit of an understanding of what the experience is for the client. So it has different sections such as what they see, do, think, feel, hear, as well as their biggest problem and why their biggest problem matters. And what we did with this empathy map, I'll go to the next section, is we used it to help staff in the Fleet Management Center empathize with the client experience, because it was very common, and this is common across lean projects, to hear from the staff that, for example, things like, well, the client just doesn't understand what to do, what their role is to do in the process, or clients just don't fill out the form correctly, or things like that. So putting kind of the onus of the problem or why things break down on the responsibility of that onto the client. So we use the empathy map to help the staff members understand the experience of their client a little bit better. So we brought that actual empathy map into our improvement event that we conducted. And our improvement event was a 1-day full workshop. We had approximately 18 participants, and all the participants represented roles that were involved in the process at various steps, and depending on how much a role was involved, we would accommodate for that in the number of participants. So for example, the role called fleet specialist was involved quite a bit in the process, so we had at least 2 fleet specialists in the room with us, as well as management and leadership was in the room with us as well, because we wanted to make sure we were able to make decisions right then and there in the workshop, and having management there with us empowered us to do that. So our improvement event was focused on 2 purposes. One was to start getting a sense of our value stream map. And you can see there is a graphic. You can't see all the details, but there's a graphic showing our current state value stream map. But the graphic with all the green boxes and the blue boxes on top isn't where we started. Where we started in the workshop was, you can see there's a picture on the left-hand side with pink sticky notes and green sticky notes. And the pink sticky notes across the top are high-level steps that we identified in our interviews with staff that we then wanted to break down into one more level of detail during the workshop to start getting a sense of the sequence of those steps. So during the workshop, we just focused on the step sequence. And then following the workshop, we did some more follow-up focus group sessions to get our key metrics and values, such as how long each step took, how long between each step, and the information flow as well. So just to provide a little bit more context, since we're talking about the process steps now, I'm going to give a brief overview, a very simplified overview of what this process looks like in current state. So the process is triggered by a client sending some sort of trigger or signal to the fleet management center that they are ready to get rid of their vehicle. So that might be a phone call, an email, or conversation in the hallway, something like that. And from there, a representative in the Fleet Management Center emails that client a table that they need to fill out and send back to the Fleet Management Center. That table includes information such as where is the vehicle located, who's driving it, does it have a 407 transponder, which a 407 transponder relates to a toll highway in our province, does it have winter tires, all these different pieces of information that's important to know for the Fleet Management Center when disposing of the vehicle. There's a little bit of back and forth usually to get that information. And then once the information is finalized and sent to the Fleet Management Center representative, that representative takes the information and inputs it into a form in their fleet management system. And the form has approximately, it was 8 sections, all those sections relating to different pieces of data and information. Some that comes from the client, some that didn't. That form is then, once it's completed, it's saved, printed off, hand delivered to a regional head or like a manager, and it is reviewed by that head and signed off with a written signature, scanned back into their computer, emailed back to the representative that was working with the client, which is then forwarded to another Fleet Management Center department dedicated to disposals, printed off again once it's received, hand delivered to someone else who handles the relationship with auction companies. Once there's about a batch of 8 to 10 of those forms printed off on that person's desk, they reconcile what the information that's on the form with the information that's in their fleet management system that generated the form, and then they say, yep, everything matches, and forward an electronic copy of that form to the auction company with a written message saying, we're ready to dispose of this vehicle, please contact the client that is listed on the form to arrange for the vehicle pickup. At that point, the auction company contacts the client. They arrange a time for the vehicle to be picked up. The vehicle gets picked up about 3 to 5 business days later, and the possession of the vehicle is then in the hands of the auction company. The auction company goes through a series of steps to get the vehicle ready to be disposed of. That includes things like cleaning the vehicle, replacing a battery if it's required, removing any decals on the car, doing an inspection of the vehicle, those sorts of things. So there's costs associated with all that work that is documented and tracked. And then once the vehicle is sold, whatever the sale value of that vehicle is, the disposal expenses are subtracted from that, and a check is sent back to the Fleet Management Center, along with an electronic file outlining all the expenses and the sale value. That electronic file is reconciled with the check. The check is sent to a central agency in our Ontario Public Service, and the electronic file information is used to recover all the disposal expenses from the client. So from that description, you can probably hear some of the waste. I was particularly pointing out in my description certain wastes on purpose, but it's a very cumbersome process. And from end to end, it took approximately 126 days on average. And that's an average. Sometimes there were extreme outliers that it would take a lot longer than that. And of that 126 days on average, the vehicle would sit idle waiting to be actioned or picked up from the auction company for 12 days. And again, that is an average. There were extreme cases where a vehicle was sitting idle for up to 3 months, incurring damage. We have harsh winters here, so there could be rust, flat tires, that sort of thing. To give a sense of the size of the process, last fiscal year, over $5 million worth of vehicles were sold, or we received that much money in vehicle auction, as well as approximately $450,000 worth of disposal expenses. And that is attributed to a total of 1,142 vehicles that were disposed last year. So that's a high-level description of the process. And sorry, I just am trying to get to the next page. So we, in advance of our improvement event, when we started to get the sense of those steps in the process, we also decided to use a service design method called hypothesizing, and we gathered a number of different hypotheses from all fleet management staff about how they thought the process could improve. We then, so we gathered about 19 unique hypotheses in advance of our improvement event. So half of our improvement event was dedicated towards looking at those hypotheses and doing a root cause analysis on which hypotheses connected to our problem and which hypotheses were actually connected to a root cause of why the process was taking so long and why certain pain points were being experienced. So an outcome from that root cause analysis discussion with analyzing those hypotheses, we identified 12 hypotheses that were prioritized into short, medium, and long-term buckets. And that was related to an affinity analysis that we did to determine dependencies. So, for example, it didn't necessarily make sense to pursue hypothesis B before pursuing hypothesis A. So we decided to focus on two main hypotheses in our initial further root cause analysis. And those were, if we examine the purpose of and function of the vehicle disposal request form. That's the form that they were filling out in their fleet management system. Then we could potentially eliminate the form and save 5 processing days. Our second hypothesis was related to approvals, and we said if we reduce the number of approvals down to 1, then 5 steps could be eliminated. So we started off with these hypotheses, and we needed to gather more information to explore what it would really mean to achieve these hypotheses. That launched us into about 2 months worth of discussions, and we really broke down that vehicle disposal request form section by section. So as I mentioned previously, there were 8 sections in that form, and you can see a graphic of that form, and there are red boxes outlining the data that we ultimately determined didn't need to be included in the form and ultimately collected. So this translated to a reduction of data fields from 61 to 23. And ultimately, the remaining information was auto-populated information about the vehicle that came from their fleet management system, as well as what the client address was, what their contact information was, and how they preferred to be contacted. That information was all that remained on the form, so it was greatly simplified. And to give you an example of how we were able to eliminate some of this information, it seems like the information was truly required. So for example, in section 2 or 3, it was dedicated towards declaring the vehicle condition. And it had fields related to engine, body, brakes, that sort of thing. And we examined a sample of the forms and found that majority of the time, the vehicle condition was always declared as poor. So we started asking questions around, so if it's always declared as poor, which makes sense because the vehicle is at the end of its life, then what is the value of providing this information? And the response was that we are legally obligated to declare the condition of the form as a result of legislation for consumer protection under the Motor Vehicle Dealers Act. So our response was, okay, can we consult with legal to see if that's still relevant legislation for us, if the legislation has changed at all? And they said, well, I don't think it has, but sure, we'll just do it anyways. So we reached out to legal, and they came back and responded saying, actually, we're going against the legislation because MTO, our ministry, is not considered a dealer of vehicles. The auction company is considered a dealer of vehicles because they're the ones selling the vehicle. So by us declaring the condition, we're taking that ownership off of the auction company, who are in turn actually legally obligated to provide that condition information. So we said, oh no, okay, let's talk to the auction companies then. So we reached out to them saying, we're making an amendment to our contract, we're requiring that you declare the condition of the vehicle. And their response was, well, actually, we've already always inspected the vehicle for its condition because we never really relied on the information you provided us in the form because it always said it was poor, and that wasn't good enough for us. So all along, the auction company was doing their own inspection of the vehicle, declaring the condition of the vehicle, regardless of the information that we were providing. So we said, wow, okay, then we're just going to take out that section altogether and let the auction company do their thing. So that's just one example of how we broke down every single section, examined the purpose, asked why are we collecting this information? Is it providing us with achieving the purpose that we actually think it is achieving? From there, we created a mock form that we wanted to test. And we started having conversations around, so with the changes that we're going to make to the form, how does that relate to the process? So there were certain steps in the process that were being triggered by these sections in the form. So you can see there's a revised current state value stream map graphic there, and we've attributed icons related to certain wastes to certain steps in the process. And we've also outlined in red boxes all the steps and pieces of information flow that were eliminated as a result of our discussions. So from there, the changes that were being proposed would result in a reduction of over 1,000 signatures being eliminated, bottlenecks being reduced because we eliminated multiple approvals, increasing simultaneous processing, and all these different kinds of waste that were being reduced as a result of the discussions that we had. So from there, we created a new proposed process that we wanted to test. And so we crafted a testing plan as well as a metrics gathering spreadsheet for us to measure what the improvements that we were anticipating, what those truly were going to translate to. So we worked with staff to do some usability testing with the new form that we came up with to see how clients would handle that form and interact with it. And they are currently in the process of continuing to measure the impacts to their process and measure those improvements. So now that brings me to the last section where we have some of our measurements, but we're still gathering some. So we have approximately 4 steps eliminated from the process. Information outputs were reduced from 15 to 5. Handoffs between both the client and Fleet Management Center staff were reduced from 12 to 8. Approvals were cut in half. Data fields, as mentioned previously, were reduced from 61 to 23, and we're still measuring the amount of days that are being saved as a result of these changes. So now the business area, we're in a kind of coaching mode with them of how they can go through the plan, do, check, adjust cycle, and how they get into that rhythm of continually making iterative changes to their process and addressing any client concerns that come up. They are involving clients in their discussions on how to make changes to the form, and also continuing to bring more staff into improvement discussions. So all in all, it has been a great project for us, and it's ongoing, and we look forward to the further improvements that we're going to make, because there's still lots of opportunity to reduce the process even further. And yeah, that's in a nutshell what the project was, and that concludes what I wanted to talk about. I know that we're going to save questions for the end, but I wanted to showcase a couple more pictures from our project. These are some pictures from our improvement event showing how people were so engaged in those discussions. And you can see also we have our team's email addresses, which we are happy to share with you as well. So I'll hand it back over to Courtney, and I look forward to your questions at the end.
Thank you so much, Brianne. You did a great job there. So we're having a conversation on our side here, and we want people to be able to ask you questions now. So I'm really sorry to throw a wrench in the plans here.
No, that's fine. We're good with that.
Awesome. So does anyone have a question for Brianne and her team?
Hey,
Gary,
Brianne, this is Gary from CDOT, and I'll start off the questions. And again, terrific presentation, and you'll love the improvement there. You mentioned you're using empathy mapping, which is terrific, not always used with Lean, pulling in some of the design thinking tools. Do you all teach that as part of your methodology, or have you pulled that in specifically for this project? Could you chat just a little bit more about empathy mapping and maybe some of the other tools you use from design thinking, human design approach?
Absolutely. It's a great point that you bring up. So I mentioned a couple of different design thinking or service design or human-centered design tools and methods that we use, such as the empathy mapping, hypothesizing, usability testing. So those aren't exactly lean tools, but if anyone has experience with service design or human-centered design thinking, the principles are very similar to lean. So in a lot of our work, we attribute or draw from multiple different methodologies, lean, service design, really just drawing from whatever tool would work best to suit the need that we're trying to achieve for the project. So we've even talked about in the future doing a service blueprint and looking at journey mapping for the experience of the user, as well as value stream mapping to get those multiple perspectives. So we aren't kind of lean purists. We definitely draw from lean as well as other methodologies. So for empathy mapping, the value of that is very similar to voice of the client or voice of the customer in lean. So gathering information about what the voice of the customer is, that's similar to the service design concept of user experience or journey mapping, and an output of that is also an empathy map. And it's just another way of showing voice of the client ultimately. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that's great. Appreciate that. I think that's a great addition to the methodology, and thanks for sharing that with us today.
And if I can add to what Brianne was saying, is we find that they're very complementary. Sometimes you need to do service design to get the information and the data you need for your lean. Sometimes it's vice versa. For designing a new process, we want to design it using service design, but with lean in mind. So we want to make sure the processes are not wasteful before we design them, before we implement them. So they are very complementary, and we don't say this starts here, we have to do service design here and then lean. Depends on the project. We're very fluid, but we combine them together, and they've been very helpful, especially as Brianne alluded, getting the voice of the customer. And service design has a lot of tools for that.
Mm-hmm. And we often talk about, we don't know where lean ends and service design begins, or service design ends and lean begins, because they are just so complementary.
Yeah, and I would also even say that applying some of the service design tools like usability testing really gets the staff and employees interacting with the users and clients themselves. So we actually had Fleet Management Center staff conduct that usability testing to engage with the client to understand their experience with the new process.
Yeah, and I would say usability testing in particular is a really good tool to assist with the plan, do, check, adjust lean method. And it provides a little bit more structure to the plan, do, check, adjust to say, let's just plan a hypothesis, how we're going to test that out, do it, execute it, and do some measurements for us to check in, and then ultimately adjust based on those findings, using usability testing and involving the client in those discussions.
That's great. Just a quick follow-up question. About how long have you all been, this is a great project, and I'm sure there's some other projects, about how long have you all been doing this with your folks there at MTO? So
the particular business area that we worked with on this project, the Fleet Management Center, they started their lean journey very early, or earlier than I would say some other areas. So lean has been practiced in pockets across the Ontario Public Service, but it's just starting to really become a commonly mentioned tool, and we're trying to put some structure around how to be lean and implement lean projects across the Ontario Public Service. So our experience varies on the team in how long individually we've been practicing lean, but I'd say as an organization, we're very new to practicing it as a corporate-wide initiative, but there are some pockets in our organization that are quite experienced in it. So that's kind of a mixed answer. Hedia, do you want to build on that? No? Okay.
I just wanted to say, Brianne, that Peter has a couple of questions in the chat.
Okay.
Thanks, Hedia. We were going to move along to there. I'm actually going to pass it along to Sydney now so that she can read those questions for us.
Sure, yeah. We have one question from Peter. He says, amazing combination of tools and techniques and really love the A3. Wondering how you're measuring time in your process performance. You mentioned days. Are these business days or calendar days? And for average, are you using mean or median?
So it varies based on the project. So ideally, if there are some concrete data that we can draw from that has some date and time stamps for us to do some more concrete analysis on averages of how long it takes for one piece to flow through a process. So in this case, it would be a single vehicle flowing through the process. That we were fortunate enough to be able to draw from some data that they, for this project, had in their fleet management system, that they had some key date stamps that we analyzed. But generally, that's not always possible. And I would say majority of the time, it's not actually possible to do that kind of analysis. So we focus more on value stream mapping with the business area to ask them to give a pretty good indication of how long a particular task takes for the cycle time, and then estimating of that cycle time, how long do they spend actually working on the value, so to get value time. So to get lead time, we measure the time that it takes between one step to another step. So that takes a little bit of facilitation practice in order to interpret what that means for a particular process. But in order to get our lead time, it's not the most accurate, but we basically add up all the different gaps that we identified between one step to another step. So that's our pretty good way of gathering that information, and I would say we don't lean towards either mean or median. It depends on the data that we're able to gather, and even showing both of those, they translate differently, right? So that would be my answer. I don't know if someone else wants to.
And another part of the question was, did you look at business days?
Oh, right. So business days or weeks. Again, it depends on the process. I tend to focus on business days, but sometimes, depending on what you're processing, weeks is better. What's more important is consistency. So if you start off with business days, you want to maintain that as a measurement across, and you don't want to switch between weeks or business days as you're mapping. So that's just to maintain the integrity of that data. And then just when you're communicating those numbers to your team or leadership, just saying it's business days or this is weeks. For this particular process, we measured it in actual weeks elapsed, because there was a big chunk of the process that was attributed to the auction company processing. So it made more sense for us to focus on not just business days, but the total elapsed time in weeks. Does that answer the question?
We're gonna go with yes. Thank you so much, Brianne. We really appreciate you doing that presentation for us. You did a great job. Now we are gonna move on. We're gonna move on to Nigel now. He's gonna discuss how Agile fits with Lean. And if anybody has any questions for Brianne, we'll come back to her at the end, okay?
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so you have my first slide up there. So this presentation, or the reason that it's coming to you today, is comes out of the last Transformation Lean Forum, where Gary asked a question whether anybody has any experience or a background in Agile, and so it just so happens that I have a segment on Agile in my Transportation Project Management class at San Jose State. And so I offered to present my segment here. I find my students, being in the Silicon Valley in San Jose, there's a lot of interest and discussion about Agile in my class. But I don't do this in my class, it's a project management class overall, but we do deal with Agile in a short part of the class. So here, first of all, this figure here comes from the Agile Practice Guide, published by the Project Management Institute, and I put it in here to illustrate the fact that PMI, and I would agree with them, considers that Agile is a subset of Lean. So here in the Transportation Lean Forum, we are still within Lean. It's very much a Lean practice, but we call it Agile, and it has a bit of history as to why that is on the next slide. So the Agile, as it's currently used in software, has its origins in a meeting of a group of software developers in 2001, where they came up with what they called the Agile Manifesto, and looked at alternative ways of producing software projects because they were unhappy with standard traditional project management. And part of the Agile Manifesto is these 12 principles that you see on the screen. You don't need to read them all because I'm going to talk about them as we go forward. So these are the core of the Agile Manifesto. So the first thing to note about the Agile Manifesto is that it was written by software developers, for software developers, or for software development. And you'll see the word software appears 3 times among these 12 principles. Now, that doesn't mean that these ideas can't be used anywhere else, and we'll talk about how it can be used. But the origin was in software, and it's most prevalent in software. You'll find, when you talk with software developers, I find that within 30 minutes, if we talk about their jobs, somebody's talking about Agile. It just comes up right away. But I guess because I'm in project management, they thought, oh, we do Agile. So it's definitely something that software developers are very much aware of, is this Agile approach. So the first thing I want to talk about the Agile approach is that Agile, I'll read my notes, I've got things covering it. So it's oriented towards small, short-term projects. So I have highlighted some of the Agile Manifesto. I'm going to close down the chat here because it's covering over, so I can't see what's on the screen. Okay, so it's Agile. It's oriented towards small, short-term projects. So you look at some of these items, like item number 2, welcoming change requirements even late in development. So an Agile, you're working with an Agile team. You can go well into the project and still make major scope changes. Now, in transportation projects, where you have a highway or rail or some other similar kind of project, you really can't make major scope changes halfway down the project. You get locked into what you're going to build fairly early on by comparison, and you can't make major changes that you could here with Agile. Delivering software frequently weeks rather than months. That's something for us in transportation. We talk about delivering something in weeks. We take very often many years to develop a transportation project. And here they say, well, months is a long time. We got to do it by the week. close daily cooperation between business people and developers. The emphasis there on daily. So your customers are speaking to your developers every day. And again, on a transportation project, we may have tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of customers being the traveling public. We can't possibly speak to all of our customers every day. Projects are built around motivated individuals who should be trusted. So, which implies that you know the people in your team. So, you can do that on a small team, 5, 10, 15, 12 people maybe. But when you get to a Panama Canal or a major project running into hundreds of millions or billions of dollars, you can't know every person and really trust them. So you need to have some sort of inspection, some sort of controls. Face-to-face conversation and co-location is an important part of Agile. So in Agile, typically you'll have a big room where everybody on the team sits together in the same room, or certainly they're in a location where they can get up and talk to everybody else on the team. And again, with kind of projects we have in transportation, we typically are not small enough to be able to do that. We have multiple locations of necessity in our operations. Then the best architecture emerged from self-organizing teams. And again, to have a self-organizing team implies that you have a small team. You can try to have a self-organizing team when you have hundreds or thousands of people involved in the project would be very difficult. Next thing about Agile is that quality is achieved through daily engagement with the customers, and team members self-check or check each other. There's no external quality control. You don't give it over to all project change process. So you don't have somebody external to the project whose approval approval you need to go forward. You don't need to go external for change requests. You don't need to go for external for inspection. Everything's done within the team. So you have a daily cooperation with your customer, number 4. So the customer can approve changes, excuse me, on the day. Projects are built around motivated individuals who can be trusted. So again, you trust your people to do good work. Maybe they will, as part of the team activity, they will have their friends and team colleagues will check themselves, check their work. But you don't have an inspector who comes in and approves the work. The measure of the success is that you have a product that you can give to the customer. So it's not some sort of external measure of success other than the customer who's right there as present with you every day. It's continuous attention to technical excellence and good design. So the team is checking themselves, they're talking to their colleagues. And then number 11, basic, the architecture requires it's self-organized. You don't have inspectors checking things. And then number 12, you do lessons learned. So you're constantly going back with your team, learning lessons, improving your process. It's not an external process. You don't have a project change process that we would have typically in transportation projects. So those are some aspects of Agile. But I would point out to you, though, that Agile is, as that first diagram said, it's a form of Lean. So you look through these items, you see words that you who are involved in Lean will recognize. Principle number 1, customer satisfaction. You're focused on meeting your customer's needs, which is an essential part of Lean. You welcome change requirements. Number 2, that's just-in-time delivery is right there. That's a form of just-in-time delivery. Projects are built around motivated individuals. You have employees are empowered, which is a part of Lean. Co-location is very often a Lean practice, having a big room. Continuous attention to technical excellence, number 9. Continuous improvement is right there. Then number 10 is a takes a bit of reading. This art of maximizing the amount of work not done. It's a roundabout way of saying avoiding unnecessary work. And so that is eliminating waste, which is a part of lean. Best architecture, it comes from self-organizing teams, again, where it's employee empowerment. And then the team reflects continuously on how they can become more effective and make adjustments. That's continuous improvement. So these things, I believe, are part of lean, as that earlier slide showed, and I see this in these principles. Yeah. Now, so the principles, of course, on their own are difficult to understand how you would implement these principles. And so when I talk with people about Agile, they start talking about Agile, and then within a few minutes, we'll find that people will shift over and start talking about Scrum. And so based upon that fact, that my personal experience, that every time people talk about Agile, they switch over and start talking about Scrum, I believe that Scrum is the most common form of Agile. And Scrum is a term that comes out of rugby. I guess I believe a couple of Japanese folk first started talking about Scrum, and that they said that this process is similar to a game of rugby with Scrum and sprints. Now, I started playing rugby when I was 8 years old, and I don't know that I see it quite the same way. But nevertheless, it's a process you could talk about. You could talk about, if you talk about football, American football, you could say a scrimmage and then a sprint, or scrimmage and running as being the two parts of this process. So it starts out in the left here, where you have, you get your team together and they go through and create a list of stories. Stories are down the left-hand side here. And stories are basically things that you want to be able to do in your software. So you could say you have an icon and you click on the icon and the software presents you with a list. And then you choose an item off the list. So those are stories, things that are happening. You take an action, it has a response. Then you choose an action off the list and there's another response. Or you type in a text and you press enter and the software does something. Those are stories. So what they do is every week, typically weekly, you get your whole team together and you go through the stories, or you look at the stories, and team members will say, you know, we're ready to work on this story, and they will take items out of the stories. I hope you can see my mouse moving over here. So take items out of the stories and put them into the to-do list. And so the to-do list is things that we believe we can do and complete in this cycle, or typically a week. So then they put things in the to-do list, and each item in the to-do list is assigned to a team member. And then as the team members work, team member will take an item off the to-do list and put it into the in-progress list. So now they're working on this story. And then as they complete the story, they will hopefully talk with the customer maybe a few times in the course of that process. And because the customer's there, talk to them every single day. And they will, once the story is complete, they move it over to testing. The customer tests it, it works, or the customer may say it needs to have some more improvement. It goes back into do, and you go through the cycle a bit, to do, in progress, testing, till you believe the story is working, and then you move it over into the complete line on the right-hand side. So the intention is that everything that you put in the to-do list at the beginning of the week will end up in the right-hand column by the end of the week. So you go through, and each week you go through the cycle of producing more stories that you can give to the customer. You also have a daily, there's a 24-hour circle here. So your daily, each day you just get together for a mini scrum. Could call it maybe a loose scrum, we could call it. A mini scrum, and just check in with everybody. How's everything going for you guys? Did anybody need any help? You're having any troubles? Just make sure everybody's all together. Finally, you come back on the weekly meeting. Weekly meeting, you hand over to the customer a set of software that is usable. So that is your output of the week. So that we talked earlier in the manifesto, it said you want to have deliverables by weeks rather than months. So we talk about the weekly. Maybe some organizations may have scrums every 2 weeks rather than 1 week, but typically it's not much more than that you're delivering products to the customers. Sometimes the customer will say, well, I have a large customer base that I'm working with. So rather than, although you may deliver products to me every week, we'll package them all together and we'll go for 3 months or 6 months and all the package of improvements. And then once every 3 months or 6 months, we'll do a major release and release a whole bunch of these stories to our customer base. So say you're working with a bank or a large corporation or a big retail organization or something like that, you'll release a whole set of stories as a package rather than doing weekly releases to your larger customer base. But nevertheless, they are delivering items to the customers every week, or to the customer representative who's on the team, who's there with you every day. So again, I see this definitely as being part of Lean, and going back to the 2 pillars of Lean from Toyota. That Lean is respect for people. So engaging your employees, respect for people is about engaging employment, teamwork. Continuous improvement and I believe that those 2 are inseparable. If you have respect for people, if you have teamwork, then you will have continuous improvement because the team is working and has empowered to make changes and to improve the way they do work. And you can't have continuous improvement, I believe, without respect for people. If your employees are not engaged, you will not have continuous improvement. You could have improvements that are management-driven and discontinuous. But management-driven improvement is not continuous. Management-driven improvement comes up. The management comes up with an idea and approves an idea and rolls it out, and that takes a while. It's not continuous. But continuous improvement requires respect for people. And so I think definitely Agile does fit in with Lean and continuous improvement. So the summary then of what I've had is that Agile is a subset of Lean. It's built around these 12 principles. The key distinctives to mind of Agile that sets it apart from other types of Lean are: 1, the daily contact with the customer. So you're talking to your customers every single day and interacting with them and getting their feedback. Last minute scope changes can be included because of the daily contact with the customers. There are several approaches to Agile. Scrum is not the only one, but Scrum is the one that I found to be the best known. And although it was created for software, Agile could be applied to other types of projects. So anything where you have a case where you can meet with your customers every day and where you can want to accommodate last minute scope changes, you could do Agile. But as I said, probably you would need to have a very small team and fairly small projects. Then there are other approaches. If you would take out those 2 items, the daily contact with customers and last minute scope changes, then you are down to something that is very similar to Lean scheduling, also known as the Last Planner system. And I know we have talked about Last Planner before in Transportation Lean Forum. So it's a lean approach to scheduling, a lean approach to planning of projects is Last Planner or Lean scheduling. And basically it is the same as Scrum, but without the daily contact of the customers and the last minute scope changes, because Lean scheduling does imply that you know what your scope is, you're not going to change it. So that's all I have, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Nigel. Does anyone have any questions? We have a question here from Gary.
Hey, Nigel, thanks again. I appreciate your support of everybody that's in the Transportation Lean Forum. You noted on the front slide that you're a retiree there in California from Caltrans, our friends there in transportation. I know that you're currently at the university. I'm curious though, regarding Agile, do you have folks in your classes or interest, otherwise from folks in Caltrans about using Agile or trying to apply some of the principles? Just curious about that.
No, there are some people in my class who are software people, and so they do know about Agile. So they are software developers, with companies like the sort of some of the new startups around the Silicon Valley that are dealing with transportation that we have nowadays, that the disruptive technologies in transportation. But most of my class are people in transportation agencies, like all the folk in this call right now, government agencies, and none of them are actually using Agile, but they were all interested to hear about it because we hear so much about it from our colleagues in software. And typically, as I say, I see the lean scheduling or last planner is the thing that's most likely to be of use to us in most transportation projects, because we really can't make major scope changes. We have an environmental document, and the environmental document ties us into a particular scope. So if we wanted to make a major change to a project, we'd have to go back and revisit the environmental document, and that'd be a major setback. So the people are doing Agile very often in software. People are doing apps for cell phones. So you'll have a team working on a new app for the cell phone, and they have an idea of what they want to achieve, and then they're going down the road and they're writing code, and then they'll say, well, no, rather than producing the app we thought we were going to produce, our code may have an alternative usage, and they'll change direction and go and produce a different app than the one they thought they were going to produce. Or maybe they were halfway through this process and somebody else comes to market with an app that does what they thought they were going to produce. So they say, well, we need to have a different app that'll set us apart from our competition. So they'll change direction, in the course of app development. But so our work, because we are tied into government approval, we have to get a commission has to approve the project. We have to get an environmental document. We don't have that ability to just go and talk to customers and change direction. But we can nevertheless use lean principles in our projects. We can do last planner, lean scheduling, and right now I'm working with Caltrans on a few projects where we're doing last planner in the design phase and doing basically everything we talked about in Scrum, except the scope is fixed. The project we're going to produce is the project that's described in the environmental document. It's not going to be anything else.
All right, thanks. I appreciate that, Nigel.
Do we have any other questions for Nigel? Please remember to unmute yourself if you do have a question. All right, well, I want to give us a couple minutes. So if anyone has any questions for Nigel or for Brianne and her group, I'm just going to give a couple of minutes so you can either get that typed out or think about how you want to word your question. So if we don't have any questions for our presenters, I want to move on to the open forum. Does anybody have any remarks, any success stories, just anything that they want to share with the group? Y'all are awfully quiet today. Anybody? Guys, please remember to unmute yourself if you want to say something. Start over.
So we have a comment here in the chat. Somebody mentioned that to please make sure your name is on the list with AASHTO for the innovation community of practice that is forming.
Well, and folks, if you don't know much about the Ashto Innovation Community of Practice, will and whoever sent that, I probably have the right link, but if you could send the link, we'll link to folks so that they can sign up for that.
I can add to the slide.
Can you provide a bit more information about what that is?
Sure, Shar, can you step in and explain that a little? Oh, actually, she might not be able to unmute herself.
So, Shar, if you can unmute, go ahead and jump in. This is Gary, and I'll try a little bit. So it sounds like Shar might not be able to unmute. Technology is wonderful, except when it's not. So let me try as I can to fill in. There might be some other folks also on the line engaged, and certainly encourage you to do that. Innovation at Ashto has often been just restricted to the research realm, and we all know on the phone here that innovation is much larger. So there's been an effort underway to engage the Ashto Innovation initiative that's been around for a while, AII, as well as the research forum that's part of Ashto, and to try to get some cross-learning there. So there's an innovation community of practice that has just been forming, actually some discussions at a recent conference, fairly recent, but the past 2 months, that was in New Mexico, and efforts underway to get that community of practice more active. We'll post on the Lean Interchange website more information about that. Again, if there's anybody else engaged with that who's on the line, please feel free to unmute yourself or to type some stuff in, and we'll have Sydney talk really fast when you type it in. I'm kidding, but glad to provide more information on that.
Shar, I did unmute you if you want to add anything to what Gary just said.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Oh, it works. I have a voice. I did try. No, everything that Gary said. So the Innovation Community of Practice is trying to get off the ground, and right now the hope is that we'll have a call scheduled. Ashto is maintaining an email list. I don't know what kind of, some kind of list, right? A listserv. And they have some names that were sent to them like 2 years ago. We don't know how accurate or complete that list is. So if you're interested in this, you can send your name to Ashto, or you can send it to me or Gary, and we can forward it on. And then the call will be happening. The first call we're setting up will be to kind of accept or ratify the charter that a small group of us put together. I think Rod McDaniels is on the line, and he was part of that group, and some folks from Caltrans in Florida. And it really is, it takes its inspiration from the Lean Transportation Forum because of the tremendous success Gary has had doing this with Lean. The idea is, how can we create a broader sharing practice around all the state, and I don't think it has to be just US states, it could include Canada too, but the transportation organizations. So that's coming, hopefully sooner than later, and I just wanted folks to know that was out there and to try to get their name on the list if they wanted it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Looks like Hetty is asking a question about, is this a Lean innovation forum? It is not just restricted to Lean. It would be more around anywhere from continuous improvement, incremental stuff, to large, big idea implementation, innovation things. So it much like what you guys do, the right tool for the right thing. In your, you're not a state, you're, what are they called in Canada?
Province.
The province, thank you. I couldn't find the word, right. Yeah, so it would not be restricted to just Lean.
Sounds pretty cool.
We hope it will be, we'll see.
Nice.
All right. Do we have any other comments out there or information you want to share? Well, I will share something on behalf of the Transportation Lean Forum. Our group is currently in the process of creating a new website, and we're most likely going to be using communication through MailChimp in 2020. So keep an eye on your email for that information. We will be sharing it, but it is probably something that will go active in 2020. So just keep an eye out for all of that. If nobody has any other questions, comments, or concerns with the Transportation Lean Forum, we are going to...
I actually do. Sorry, this is Brianne again. I just thought maybe I would throw this out there. Our Ontario Public Service is starting, as I mentioned, to really corporately implement Lean across the whole organization. And one of the things that we're trying to develop is leadership training. So we know that probably there's a lot of you out there who have already done this, and we're wondering if we could leverage some of that work. So I kind of wanted to maybe get some contacts or names that if anyone's willing to share what they've done and their experience and even lessons learned, that would be amazing. We've reached out to particular groups, but I just thought I would put a general call out there if anyone's willing.
So that's great, and Brianne, you know, we'd certainly be glad to share here from CDOT. I highly recommend what I've seen from Arizona Department of Transportation too.
Yes, yes.
When we put out notes, can we put your email address as the person to contact on that?
Absolutely, yes.
Great, appreciate that.
Thank you.
And if there's anybody on the line right now that wants to maybe share and suggest, that'd be great too. Just unmute yourself or send a text so that Sydney can read that out.
Yeah, and we have an email here, and I'll make sure that that's saved and sent over to the folks over there.
And who's the email from?
Laura Meyer.
Okay, thanks, Laura.
But it's from Sharon.
I'm writing it down right now. Thank you.
All right, do we have any other comments or things to share?
Yeah, we have Alan happy to share what they've done on the lean leadership training in Arizona. Thank you. And we're getting in some more comments here. One is from somebody Peter, who's willing to share some lean leadership information with their contact information. We do have a question. What is the email for the Ashto listing?
And this is Gary, and Shar, you might have it off the top of your head, but if not, we will definitely share that also, the main links for the Ashto Innovation Community Practice.
All right, any other questions? Okay, well, our next TLF, our next Transportation Lean Forum, is going to be held in December. We are not sure who our host will be at this time, so we will keep everyone posted on that information, and we will let you know as soon as we know. And if you are interested in being a future presenter, please contact Gary, and he will be able to share that information so that we can get you on our list. And that is the end. So thank you everyone for logging in for today's TLF, and I hope that everyone got a lot of knowledge and information from our speakers, and hopefully this was beneficial to everyone. So thank you.
Thanks so much for hosting.
Thank you.